Welcome to Norse Code, the #1 podcast for your Minnesota Vikings. I'm your host and producer. My name is James Pogashnik. Thank you guys so much for listening. And at the other end of the tin cannon string, we have our analyst and co-host. You know him from numerous blogs, radio shows, and podcasts around the internet. He is Arif Hassan. Arif, how are you?
I'm great. You asked that like in a way where I should have some sort of like specific answer, and it's just like I watched a weird football game. That's pretty normal when we head into these podcasts.
Considering we record after a football game every time we record this time of year, yeah, I suppose the better question would be: do you think it was an internal injury, or do you think it was ribs when it came to Justin Herbert being crucified out there by the Chiefs?
I think in the spirit of where the game was played, you have to say ribs, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, very Kansas City type injury.
Yeah, that was, especially with the red paint going onto it as well, so...
Oh, yeah, absolutely. What did you say before? It looked like a war wound? Yeah, I think this is going to be great.
Yep, something like a war wound. Before we start, Arif, do you have anything you would like to announce and blame on Luke Braun?
Yeah. So starting on September 21st, I will be leaving The Athletic and no longer covering the Vikings for them. And instead, I'll be joining Pro Football Network as their lead NFL writer. I'm super amped up, super excited to do this. I'll still continue to cover the Vikings for Minnesota Football Party, for Norse Code here, and also on KFan, but I'll be doing national level work from a writing perspective starting on the 21st. So super excited to do it. Super thankful for everybody who has helped me get to this point, including everybody who reads my work and who listens to this show and the other media that I'm on. And that extends to the people who have helped me put myself into these platforms. That includes James, obviously, whose explicit goal, along with Dusty, was to get me a platform when we started this Norse Code project. So super grateful, super thankful, and super excited.
And are we blaming anything on Luke, or is this your decision? Blink twice if this is like being done under duress.
So Luke Braun has made existing in Vikings Twitter hell for me. And I imagine for everybody else who has to interact with him and his content. So I think that while I would like to say that I made this decision on my own, no one ever really can be independent of the environment that they were a part of. So, who's to say what role Luke Braun played in eliminating one avenue of Vikings coverage?
Jeez.
That's not for me. That's, I think, for sociologists 10, 20, 40, 50 years down the road to do, I think, a more thorough analysis of.
100 years from now, people are going to be going through Twitter and what caused the end of Western society, and going, wow, look at these. Why was Arif Hassan so angry at Luke Braun all the time?
The idea, and I know that this is going to happen, but still the idea of anthropologists and sociologists downloading like Twitter's archives and the archives of Twitter's archives 100 years from now and evaluating its contents gives me an unmitigated amount of like a Schadenfreude type joy and extraordinary horror.
You're in the future, and your future now sucks.
Yeah. Just like, can you imagine someone trying to reconstruct what human society must have looked like only using tweets? Good Lord.
Yeah, that sounds like a very personal version of hell. All right. Well, on that note, let's get into today's show, everyone. We have a game to preview. We are going to preview the Eagles game with winner of the middle school Philadelphia Eagles trivia contest, Ben Natan. I'm looking forward to that. I'm looking forward to that interview, and that'll happen here in just a moment. And then we have the mailbag as well. But again, thank you guys so much for listening to Norse Code. If you enjoy the show and would like to help with financially for Norse Code. You can do so in a couple of different ways. You can go over to paypal.me/Norse Code and send in a one-time donation over there. You can go to patreon.com/Norse Code and subscribe, get bonus material like the fine folks over at Patreon got this week. They got an hour, I think it was about an hour bonus episode over there, so check that out. The next one's going to be kind of interesting. I recorded something with Dusty, and I'm kind of curious as to if people like it, if people hate it, or if they just have no opinion. But that'll be the next episode that we put out. So looking forward to doing that.
No opinion would be the most surprising outcome.
At one point, a lot of rum came out, and we were talking about Dusty's penchant for shooting squirrels in his backyard, and everything kind of went off the rails. So I look forward.
From Grand Forks.
Well, at some point, Dusty just full on just embraced the Hunter S. Thompson thing. I don't know. He's got chickens running around the yard, so it's kind of weird.
Perfect.
Between that and the bee content, actual literal bee content on the show. But patreon.com/Norse Code, check it out. We got bonus material. We got the Patreon, Discord, cool stuff over there. A couple people we want to thank real quick. Tim Horsbaugh, thank you so much. Mike Driscoll, dude, awesome. I remember you. You kick ass. Thank you so much for subscribing over at Patreon. And Alan, who sends a PayPal over to us to, quote, send the boys to London. Thank you, Alan, so much for the donation. Sorry I missed you last week. And just as a quick note, the London show is going to be the live episode after the Saints game, October 2nd, over at Antwerp Arms. Again, Antwerp Arms, just outside of the stadium. It should be about a 5 to 10 minute walk, maybe. It's just a couple of blocks. But Antwerp Arms on October 2nd after the game. You can also go to norsecode.threadless.com in order to pick up a Norse Code shirt, a baby onesie. The shower curtain is always an option. Or if you need to send Luke Braun a sweater, a Christmas sweater with a Reef's face on it. Like
as an example.
I'm not even trying to be specific on this. I just think that this is something he should own, and you can get this over at norsecode.threadless.com. All right, all shilling aside, let's check in with the winner of the Middle School Philadelphia Eagles Trivia Contest, Ben Natan, with an interview that Arif did earlier today.
All right, I'm here with Ben Natan of Bleeding Green Nation, a friend of the show, occasional friend of Arif Hassan. How you doing, man?
I am doing very well, and it's nice of you to call me a friend of the show. I don't think I've been on, actually, for a couple years now.
Yeah, I've always found a way to invite a different Eagles person, but I think you were doing Eagles stuff on and off too. Like you weren't always doing so. That was part of it, but also it speaks to kind of the second thing. You're only an occasional friend of mine. I have no emotional obligation to you if you're not a permanent friend, and so I don't really feel the need to bring you onto the show or fulfill your emotional needs as a friend.
Yeah, absolutely.
Or anything along those lines. Yeah. So.
Yeah, it really took the pandemic to like knock out the acting thing for a little bit for me to be like, okay, I should
get rid of that.
I should probably focus a little bit more on being a sports writer for the next couple of years. So
how's that going?
It's going well. I'm finally making money being a sports writer.
Oh man, tell me about it.
Yeah.
All right, cool. Yeah, we're here to talk about the Eagles. They just had an embarrassing but good win against the Detroit Lions. I don't know how to put it. Yeah. Put up 38 points, 31 offensively, right? There was one defensive touchdown.
Pick six.
35 points allowed. Don't know what that's about. We'll talk about that in a little bit. But the thing that really interests me is that before the season began, the Eagles were probably the favorite to win the division, which always struck me as odd because Jalen Hurts did not strike me as a top 20 quarterback. I thought, really fantastic fantasy option, but really inconsistent as a passer. Can't really marry, his running capability with his passing capability. And it just seems like there was an assumption across not just Eagles media, but national media that he would take that next step. And I've seen a lot of quarterbacks with a lot of sky-high potential, great intangibles, which Jalen Hurts unquestionably has. It's the one thing everybody agrees on. Not take that next step. And now obviously the Eagles are definitely the favorite because, Dak Prescott got injured. I don't know how many games he's going to be out, 6 to 8 or something like that. And that really puts the Eagles in pole position, basically, assuming that Carson Wentz continues to be Carson Wentz. So my question, I guess, primarily is why did people assume that Jalen Hurts would take that next step?
Since he was a freshman at Alabama, he has consistently taken steps forward as like a true quarterback. From his time at Alabama to, then being at Oklahoma, being a Heisman candidate at Oklahoma. His first season, with the Eagles, he was kind of thrown into a really bad situation late in the season with the whole offense was extremely dysfunctional. Wentz had completely petered out, and he kind of gave them a little bit of a spark, enough obviously for them to move on from Wentz that offseason and make him the starter. Last year was a frustrating year, but eventually it ended on a relatively good note with the new coaching staff, Nick Sirianni coming in and a very different philosophy. Nick Sirianni had, never been a head coach before. Jalen Hurts is his first year as a full-time starter of the offense. And it really felt like the first half of the season was them, the whole offense really figuring out what they were, from an identity standpoint. The play calling felt super disjointed through the first couple of games. There wasn't really an identity that they had formed. And once they kind of figured out, we need to be a running football team, they just started, plowing over defenses on a week-to-week basis. And the support from the running game, plus, through the passing game being like, we need to just kind of feed Dallas Goedert and Devontae Smith, there was a lot more stability through the back half of the season that I think gave a lot of people confidence that, okay, this offense definitely has a trajectory, and a full offseason working within this kind of offensive identity. Then you add in AJ Brown, you add in, Zach Pascal, you take away Jalen Reagor. And the hope is that now that you have a kind of 1A, 1B at wide receiver, and then you have, Pascal and Quez Watkins as kind of like your third and fourth option, that Jalen Hurts is going to then, continue his trajectory as a quarterback, hopefully take another step forward, feel more comfortable in this offensive system, and really improve.
It still sounds like wishful thinking, right? Because a lot of what you described also describes Christian Ponder entering his second and then his third year, right? Which he did not turn out to be a franchise quarterback. I don't know if you knew that.
I remember vaguely Christian Ponder.
Right. Well, it's just like he's a guy that improved every year in college, had remarkable intangibles, really smart. People love him. He shows up at the Vikings. There's a disjointed offense with a veteran that really seems to be falling apart in terms of his, ability to lead things. I think you might remember him, Donovan McNabb.
Yeah.
Took over the offense partway through the season, was a huge spark in that offense. The season did not go as planned, but it did end on a little bit of a high note. Then the 2012 season happens, obviously led by this remarkable running game, but also for the first half of the season had Percy Harvin doing all kinds of things. You enter this final season with the Vikings, they bring in a couple new receivers, and Ponder just doesn't take that next step. I don't know. It just seems like I've never seen the assumption that a quarterback will improve so bought into that it even shows up in the betting markets. I just don't know why we all assumed it. And then in part, seemingly that it did happen, right? Because your evaluation of the Detroit Lions game, obviously he started out really rough. I think he was 0 for 4, 0 for 5 to start passing. He had 35 yards running in that same span of time. So it's not as if, the offense was dead. And then it just kind of got together, but there were inconsistencies, inaccuracies. There was a vertical play where he took the whole shot where it was a completion for a first down, big gain, but he left a touchdown on the field. So do you think that he did take that next step? And again, am I missing something? Why did we all assume it was going to happen?
So I thought pretty highly of his performance in the Detroit Lions game, and part of that has to do with the fact that the game did not go at all the way that I thought it was going to go. I don't think it went how anybody thought it was going to go, except for maybe Dan Campbell. the game starts off and immediately Detroit is bringing a ton of pressure. Really heavy blitzes. Their defensive ends are getting, surprisingly high win rate on the talented pair of Eagles offensive tackles. And, Jason Kelce even said after the game, I did not do a good job with blitz pickup. And the offensive line really kind of let Jalen Hurts down. And
he said that Hurts bailed him out, which I agree with. He did.
Yeah, and I think that the team was. I mean, it was kind of like a punch in the mouth kind of situation on offense, where they really didn't expect the Lions to be so aggressive, come swinging out of the gate, which is pretty funny because I would have expected them to do that because it's Dan Campbell and like they're the kind of team that if you back them into a corner, they're going to be fighting like 3 times as hard. So it started out rough in that way, and it really took Hurts using his legs and kind of making the offense happen that way for everyone. It seemed to like settle down until the point where Nick Sirianni probably made the decision where it's like, okay, we're just going to run the passing game through AJ Brown. And they basically just started forcing the ball to AJ on a fairly regular basis. I think he ended the game with like 14 targets or something like that.
How many targets did Devonta Smith get?
4.
And how many catches?
0.
What?
Yeah.
Happened?
So AJ Brown had 10 catches. And I think that might have been more than all of the other Eagles receivers combined.
I believe that's correct.
Yeah.
If you take away the absolutely wonderful deep ball to AJ Brown down the right sideline on 4 verts, probably the best throw of Hurts' career.
Easily.
College or NFL, honestly.
Yeah.
If you take that away, is there anything else to point to that, shows you that he has matured significantly as a thrower?
I don't. I think he had a couple nice like slants that I recall, and he was getting the ball out really quickly after the first couple of drives.
That's true. Actually, let me cut you off and ask a question that I'm now interested in because I got distracted. Shiny toy. His depth of target last year was pretty deep, right? It was pretty far downfield, and it very much seemed like the Eagles wanted to send receivers deep downfield. They did so at a fairly decent rate against the Lions, but he threw shorter than any other game in particular that I remember Hurts in an NFL uniform throwing. It seemed like he was more willing to throw underneath. It seemed like he was more willing to get rid of the ball quickly, like you said. Like a lot of these quarterbacks that, and he doesn't have like the gun of an arm like Josh Allen and Lamar Jackson and other running threats typically do, but that they seem to be able to use the running game to set up some really deep shots. It's just kind of endemic to these kinds of quarterbacks. And in this case, in this game, he really did want to throw it short a lot more often. Is this a new element to his game? Is this particular to the way the Lions played him? What's kind of the deal there?
It felt like an adjustment. It felt like once they started blitzing like crazy to start the game,
it seemed like half of his dropbacks were blitzes or something.
Yeah, they started. It seemed like they were drawing up all of these plays where it was like a quick slant to AJ Brown. It was a hitting Kenneth Gainwell out of the backfield. Getting a screen pass to Dallas Goedert. Really trying to get the ball out of his hand quickly to not only help him avoid the pressure, but also take advantage of the Lions' aggressiveness and get yards after the catch, which the Eagles were also able to do at a fairly good rate. But I mean, this is going to be the thing that people are always going to say about Jalen Hurts. It's probably one of his best traits on the field, is that his ability to not let the early downs snowball into a bad game are what makes him very easy to bet on as a quarterback. And especially in contrast with his predecessor, who, if mistakes happen early in a game or early in a season, they will snowball. He will get worse, with Carson Wentz.
Sorry, who's his predecessor?
Carson Wentz.
What school did he go to?
He went to North Dakota State University.
Okay, just making sure.
I'm sure that's of value to whatever agenda you're pushing. But
agenda, wow.
But with Jalen, it's very obvious why coaches like him, because not only is he a really smart guy, but he's really cool on the field. And it seemed like they were taking it, like the coaching staff took advantage of that and kind of trusted him to bring down the temperature a little bit on offense when the start was so rough.
So is he an accurate quarterback? And I say this knowing he dealt with a drop or two in this game. I think that if you account for drops, spikes, throwaways, etc., which he had a couple of throwaways too, he ranks like sixth or seventh in adjusted accuracy rate, depending on what your cutoff is. I think sixth for most quarterbacks by week one. But he also threw shorter, and also that's not what accuracy is, right? You know, a caught ball isn't necessarily an accurate pass. We discussed that a little bit earlier with the deep completion to AJ Brown that should have been a touchdown and wasn't. So all of that in mind, the ability to lead receivers, the ability to thread tight windows, the ability to put the ball in the best possible spot for a receiver to maximize their gain, is he an accurate quarterback?
No. And
I thought you were going to expand on that.
Okay. I mean, just the simple answer is like accuracy is not going to be his strong point as a passer. I think in the quick game he was a lot sharper than I remember him being last year. And once again, like having AJ Brown allows like that makes a lot more sense. There's a lot more trust between the two of them. So I think like he's happier to get the ball out quicker and just kind of, put it right on him. Whereas like a guy like Jalen Reagor or like even Quez Watkins in the second year didn't inspire that trust last year, which has a reasonable effect on a quarterback. I think really early in the game, they were talking about the relationship between Jalen Hurts and AJ Brown. And they said, Jalen Hurts is the godfather to AJ Brown's daughter. And I was like, and I thought to myself, one, I didn't know that. And two, now that I know that, I'm fairly confident that AJ Brown is going to catch 200 balls this year. Because it seems like there is an intangibility to like their relationship that I think is going to affect both of their play in a very positive way. But that's a very long answer to say that no, I don't think he's a typically accurate quarterback. He has parts of the field where he's better at hitting, but it's not going to be his calling card.
So knowing that, and knowing that the kind of the shorter the throw, the more accurate you need to be in order to protect receivers, lead them downfield, create yards after the catch, and also just make good on every throw. It feels like if you're a shorter throwing quarterback, you need to be more accurate than if you're a deeper throwing quarterback, which also still allows, receivers to make adjustments and track the ball with the additional time it takes for the ball to get there. Do you think that this is an element of the game that he can do consistently? Like because he wasn't very good against the blitz, against the Lions. He was 2 of 10. His scrambles only went for like 3.8 yards against the blitz. I mean, the Lions, for whatever reason, did a pretty good job, closing up his rush lanes, making him throw the ball away, and making it difficult for him to complete passes. If that continues to be an adjustment they make, can he succeed as a quarterback?
Yeah, I do think he can. And I think it also just has to do with what he has at his disposal relative to last year. And this is still very much projection because against the Lions, they were really able to exploit that AJ Brown matchup. And it's to be seen what happens when Brown might be given a lot more attention by a defense or covered by a cornerback more capable of taking him away. I should note that, in the game, Jeff Okudah was basically always covering Devontae Smith, and he did a remarkably good job. That was a very, very tough matchup for Devontae Smith. So if they face down a defense that has a more physical cornerback and can possibly take away or make it harder for them to get the ball to AJ Brown, I think that will be extremely revealing of what the offense is then capable of doing in order to adjust in the passing game. Can they get it efficiently to Dallas Goedert, Devontae Smith, whoever that third wide receiver ends up being for them. I'm once again, and this is what we started out talking about. I have this sort of confidence that it's going to be able to happen because of, Hurts's general trajectory since he got to Philadelphia. But I cannot say definitely whether or not it will happen.
How are they going to use this stable of running backs? It very much seems like they like all of them.
That entirely depends on Miles Sanders' health.
What's up with that?
So Miles Sanders missed 6 games between the 2020 and 2021 season, and they had to go to, last year late in the season while he was hurt. You saw a lot more of Kenneth Gainwell. You saw a lot more of Boston Scott, both of whom are really solid, I think, number 2 type backs. Gainwell is definitely the guy they love having in 2-minute drills because he's easily the best pass catcher of the 3 of them. But with Sanders, he is clearly the most talented all-around running back. The combination of speed, size, he has these moments where he can make really impressive cuts, where he shows off strength, where he can run through guys. But consistency, both in terms of health and play, have been a plague on him basically his whole career in Philadelphia. Now, there was a lot of hype over the course of the offseason, as there often is with a running back in his contract year, where it's like, this is going to be the year where he takes the next step. He's going to put it all together. And in the second half of the Detroit game, he looked really good. He was running decisively. He made a lot of guys miss. He broke some tackles, and he helped the Eagles kind of, slow the game down a little bit. He had his first touchdown since the Joe Biden administration started.
That's right. Yeah.
and he is, if he is healthy, he is the lead back, and he will get upwards of 16 carries a game. He is not going to be the primary receiving back. They definitely like Gainwell a lot for that role. And they're always going to mix in Scott as well, because I think Scott is probably the most consistent runner of the 3 of them. But in terms of the guy that they want to feed the most, it makes sense that it's Sanders, because he also has like the home run potential that the other 2 don't. So, this is
Boston Scott doesn't have home run potential.
No, maybe a couple years ago, but not so much anymore. It's funny. He's the smallest power back in the league, I think.
Yeah, they gave him a goal line carry. You got a touchdown.
Yeah, no, I mean he's like a slower but like more muscular Darren Sproles. It's really fun. Like
there's no such thing as a more muscular Darren Sproles.
Boston Scott is built like, I don't know, he's built like a gumball. It's really amazing.
Built like a gumball. Never heard that before. Yeah, had I heard that before, it would not have been used.
He's
as
like
a compliment.
5'6" and like 200 pounds. It's really he's a really unique.
He's like you.
Yeah, he is he's a stout king. He's built like a teapot. But they have a really good group, and that's plus what Jalen brings to the backfield as a runner as well. And they definitely get production from, that zone option, that read option game. But if, all things equal and all things healthy, Sanders is going to be the guy who leads the backfield.
And let's talk quickly about the offensive line before we get to the defense. First, is it pronounced Jurgens or Jurgens?
Jurgens.
Okay, it doesn't matter. He's not playing, right?
No, he's not playing as long as Kelsey and Samalo are both healthy.
Could Kelsey just like retire midseason? He's like, yeah, Jurgens has figured it out. I'm out.
Yeah, I mean, Kelsey was out in the preseason with an elbow injury. So Jurgens played a lot with the starters and then would play a little bit beyond when the starters were playing in all the preseason games. And he looked fantastic. He looked really, really impressive. I know there was a little bit of concern about his kind of curve coming into the NFL because he was a bit smaller coming out of college, but he looks athletic. He looks strong. He plays really tough. I don't want to say that he looks like Kelsey, but it's very clear that he is playing on the same team as Kelsey and that they're practicing together because like the style, the way that they kind of move on the field, the toughness, everything like that. So it's good to have that quality of offensive lineman on the bench, for depth, but he won't be starting now.
Is it weird that when you talk about injury concerns to interior offensive linemen, you mentioned Kelsey and Somalo, but not Landon Dickerson?
Yeah, well, Dickerson started almost. Dickerson had it took Dickerson's rookie season was really strange because he was injured. He didn't practice for basically the entire preseason camp. And then they shuffled him around a bunch early in the season, and he looked really bad. And then they finally left him in at left guard, I think like 4 games into the season, 5 games into the season. I think it was the Chiefs game was the first game. And then he looked awesome the rest of the year. And he's been healthy. I mean, obviously he has the knee injury from college, or he had 2 knee injuries in college.
Yeah.
But so far he's been pretty constant on the offensive line.
That's wild. Okay, so entering the season, I saw a bunch of preseason lists that ranked the Eagles as the number 1 offensive line in the NFL. Not the Lions, who they just played, not the Packers, not the Browns, who were there probably 2 years ago, not the Saints, who were there a couple years ago, not the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, who were there probably last year, but the Eagles. Has that held up? Do you think that that's the case?
Well, the Lions game part of the reason the Lions game was so surprising is the way that they gave up pressure early in the game. They clearly settled in the second half, and definitely once they were able to not only consistently move the ball throwing it, but move the ball running it, being able to get the linemen going downhill definitely helps just generally their ability to block at all. So in the second half of the game, they were mashing. And that was the offensive line that was so good last year was, the running, getting the running game going, letting the run blocking kind of affect how well they did in the pass blocking. And that was a lot more characteristic of what we've come to expect from them. But, and I'm sure we're going to talk about this dynamically, how it's going to affect the game. But, if they come out against the Vikings the way that they came out against the Lions, it's going to go much differently because the Vikings have a much better ability to kind of punish the Eagles offensively than the Lions were immediately able to do. It took the Lions a little bit more time for them to get, their offense, fired up, but
right.
They cannot give up that sort of pressure against the Vikings the way that they gave up against the Lions early on.
All right. Before I move on, what's your biggest worry offensively?
My biggest worry offensively is the line, or the Vikings put a ton of pressure on Aaron Rodgers. I think they sacked him 4 or 5 times.
Yeah, 4 times.
Yeah. And obviously Hurts has the ability to mitigate, sack production. But if they're able to pressure Hurts early and often in the game, I think it's going to get pretty ugly pretty quickly. Because,
right.
The Eagles famously have not been able to start fast under Sirianni. They kind of like take a little bit of time to kind of like warm up. And then by like halfway through the second quarter, it's like, okay, now the offense is working. And if they have that slow start against, what I assume this Vikings offense is going to look like, it could be 14-0, halfway through the second quarter.
Yeah, the Eagles have never overcome a Vikings fast start in their recent memory, so
yeah.
Don't have to worry about that. All right, let's talk about this other side of the ball. The Eagles sniped Janarius Robinson. He's on the roster. I assume that is for scouting purposes. The Eagles do this often?
Yeah, definitely. As soon as it happened, I was like, they're just going to ask him a bunch of questions and then cut him on Tuesday.
Cool. Well, it's always a nice way to earn a bigger paycheck.
Yeah, good for him.
Yeah. All right, so let's talk about this defensive line. Like the Lions, also a really highly touted defensive line group. I don't know what I think of Milton Williams yet, but obviously super athlete. Jordan Davis, kind of the marquee player of the class, only saw 22 snaps, although that does kind of mirror his usage at Georgia. I know Eagles fans want to see a lot more of him. And then, of course, you have Fletcher Cox, who's still producing at his age, Javon Hargrave, who's been fantastic, Josh Sweat, who seems to be underrated, and Brandon Graham, whose brand is being underrated. So what is the kind of expectation that you have for this defensive line group? And given how much the Vikings like to run zone and how important nose tackles seem to be at stopping zone runs, do you expect to see Jordan Davis out on the field a little bit more?
I would hope so, but the Lions game was kind of so confounding in the way in which the defensive line rotation was trotted out, because everyone and their mother should have known that the Lions were going to try to run the ball. That's kind of their identity under Dan Campbell. having Jared Goff under center means you can really only do so much in the passing game anyway. They have such a great offensive line and a really talented, group of running backs. It was kind of obvious that they were going to want to try to win the game on the ground. And it took a long time. It took about maybe 3 series or 2 series in before the Eagles started single gapping double gapping on the defensive line, going really heavy, not only putting Jordan Davis on the field, but also putting Marlon Tuipulotu on the field as well, who was an interior defensive lineman that they drafted in the 2021 draft. And then that's
a couple rounds after Williams.
Yes,
I remember that.
Yes. And that seemed to help. The Eagles get up 21-7, and then they just kind of stopped doing that on defense. They went back to, okay, well now obviously the Lions are going to be passing the ball a lot, so we got to be in nickel packages. We have to get Cox and Hargrave back on the field and do wide ends and everything like that. And the Lions gashed the Eagles on the ground and were able to get back in the game by running the ball and getting explosive plays on the ground with DeAndre Swift. And when asked about this after the game, the coaching staff was basically like, we didn't think that they would be able to get back into the game by running the ball, which is like, I'm like, yeah, if you're defending the run so poorly that you're giving up these 20, 25 yard runs so easily, it's like, yeah, they're going to be able to get in the game by running the football.
Well, also, if there's any team that's going to want to attempt to get back into the game via running, it's going to be they're going to run the ball either way, right? That's who the Lions are.
Right.
That's wild to me.
And the lack of usage of Davis combined with, as much as I love Fletcher Cox, Cox was not playing, did not play a good game against the run specifically. And the same thing with Hargrave. They were both really struggling where, even a guy like, Tuipulotu was doing pretty well. Milton Williams looked okay. The decision to play Derek Barnett on the edge in nickel packages so much over Hassan Reddick was very head scratching. They finally got Reddick down on the line, and Reddick had some nice plays against the run as well. But it really, and I've written extensively about this in the last week, it really brings into question what Jonathan Gannon has even been doing since last season ended. They added so many pieces on the defense, and
what have you been up to, man?
Yeah, what have you been doing? They you add Hassan Reddick, you add Kaiser White, right. You add Jordan Davis and Nakobe Dean. Obviously James Bradbury, Chauncey Gardner-Johnson. So many players who's kind of not with the exception of James Bradbury, really. The calling card of all of these players is versatility. You're going to be able to move these guys around your defense. And really affect the offense pre-snap by keeping them on their toes. And so much, I should say, about the defense against the Lions felt so vanilla in the way that the defense was so vanilla last year. And they were able to exploit it. It was very predictable. And the only times that it really felt like the Eagles defense was producing and not even producing, but just holding the Lions back was when they were being really aggressive, when they were blitzing, when they were pressing at the line. And they went away from that, when the Eagles were up 2 touchdowns, and then the game kind of turned into what the game turned into. So the hope is, in terms of, with Derek Barnett now injured, I'm curious to see what they do on the edges. Is Hassan Reddick going to play more on the edge, in those nickel packages? Because they had him playing off ball as a linebacker in those nickel packages. And instead of blitzing him, he would be dropping into coverage a lot. And the Lions were able to pick on him in coverage because, he can cover, but that's not why you pay him millions of dollars to be on your football team.
Right.
Okay,
let's talk a little bit about this linebacker group, right? Because it feels like the Eagles have just not had good linebackers, ironically, since Jordan Hicks, right?
Yeah.
It's like Michael Kendricks, Jordan Hicks. Last time the Eagles had some really seriously useful linebackers. Right. Oh, Nigel. Yeah, of course.
That was a really good group when they went to the Super Bowl.
Yeah. This feels like it could be a renaissance, right? Like Hassan Reddick's good. TJ Edwards can like read plays remarkably well. I don't really know what's going on with Nakobe Dean, Kaiser White, kind of what the deal is there, but it certainly seems like this is a linebacker group that offers at least an opportunity for a huge upgrade.
Yeah. So the way that they're doing it right now is, in a base like 43 look, you are going to have TJ Edwards as your Mike linebacker, Kaiser White is your weak side linebacker, and Hassan Reddick is the Sam. In the nickel defense right now, what they're doing is they're keeping Kaiser White on the field at all times and kind of rotating out TJ Edwards or Hassan Reddick at that other nickel linebacker spot. What I think should change is if they want somebody who can play linebacker but threaten as a blitzer at any given moment, but can also play linebacker, it makes sense to get Nakobe Dean on the field because he was such an effective blitzer while he was at Georgia. So with Derek Barnett being hurt, I'm wondering if we're going to see that adjustment being made, or if we're going to see just more TJ Edwards in the nickel packages. TJ Edwards is a really solid player. He's a really smart player, super physical, great against the run. Not a great athlete, somebody who could definitely get exploited in the passing game. So I'm curious how much they're going to trust Dean over the course of this season. Mm-hmm. I think it would behoove them to get him on the field sooner than later, because I thought very highly of him as a prospect, and letting him get his legs under him in this defense is going to be critical to the long-term success of the unit. But I don't trust Gannon. I don't trust Jonathan Gannon. I've never really trusted him. I don't think he's as bright as he must interview extremely well. When he was getting those head coaching looks last spring, I was shocked. And the excuses that were being made for him last year is that, well, the Eagles didn't have great personnel on defense. He was doing what he could with what he had, which was fair. But now the defense is stacked with talent at every level. And obviously we have a 1-game sample size to work with, but I'm like, where is any of the creativity? Where is any of the aggression that this sort of personnel affords you?
So when you've got kind of this issue, right, the people that end up having to kind of make up all the ground are in the secondary. They've upgraded that secondary with C.J. Gardner-Johnson. They have Darius Slay, who's played generally pretty well. Obviously James Bradbury, who has played really well. This secondary unit is part of the reason people have been pretty high on the Eagles. And I just kind of it seems like they're doing as much as possible to put as much stress on these guys as possible, right? Because very often, like you've mentioned blitzing, and they do like to blitz a fair amount. They keep, these guys in these enormous zones in the back, right? So there's a lot of times it's very much like a fire zone where it's like a 3-3, you've got 3 up top, 3 under, and that puts a lot of stress on these secondary guys. Knowing that they are talented, but knowing that a lot is being asked of them, is this a unit that, generally speaking, you think can hold up to that?
The big X factor at this point, because against the Lions, it was not super clear because it's Goff, so everything is kind of graded on a curve. I think the Vikings game is going to give us a much better idea of how well they hold up. I absolutely trust the guys in the secondary besides Marcus Epps, just because he is the most unproven of that group. He looked pretty solid against the Lions. He seems like a very aggressive, very smart player, totally unafraid to come up and make big hits in the running game. And I think he blew up a screen that was really impressive as well. But he is going to be a big X factor as the deep safety. And they like to kind of keep Gardner Johnson playing underneath. That seems to be what they were doing a lot against the Vikings. So I want to say yes. Darius Slay is a really good player. James Bradbury is solid. Certainly as a number 2 cornerback. Gardner Johnson, I think, is going to get even better as he gets more comfortable in this defense. But, what Marcus Epps is able to do against the Vikings should give us a lot of information in terms of, what the unit will be capable of going forward.
Former Viking Marcus Epps.
Oh, really? I didn't even know that.
Yeah, they picked him up off of waivers. The Vikings cut him in order to make room for Andrew Sendejo. So functionally,
former Eagle.
Yeah, functionally, the Vikings traded Andrew Sendejo for Marcus Epps, or vice versa, right?
Wow, don't miss that guy.
I don't know how I feel about that decision, in part because Sendejo played really well in those couple of games.
Oh, did he?
It was very bizarre. Yeah, he's not a good safety, but...
did he hurt anybody on his own team?
Obviously. Why would you even ask that?
Because that's what he did when he was playing with the Eagles.
Oh, no, he did it the multiple stops with the Vikings. He did it with the Browns. He did it with the Eagles. I bet he did it on the practice squad for the Cowboys. Like, that's just who he is as a person, right?
Really, really amazing. It's funny to have like you have like TJ Ward brain, but you're not nearly as good as TJ Ward. Like TJ Ward is like, I think like was like a pretty famously like, I don't want to say dirty player, but he would deal out some pretty nasty hits on people. But you're like, okay, well, he's good, so you kind of take the good with the bad.
I mean, the same thing with Harrison Smith, right? Where Harrison Smith was one of the hardest hitting safeties in the league. Calvin Johnson said it. Brandon Marshall said it. Like, it seems like it was true. And Harrison Smith didn't get called for a penalty related to hitting for like 4 or 5 years of his career straight.
That's crazy.
And then, Andrew Sendejo plays alongside him, and sometimes you don't need to imitate everything.
Sendejo is like the spiritual continuation of Bernard Pollard, as far as I'm concerned.
Oh, there's a good one.
Just bad player, probably not a good teammate, and just like hurting people all the time.
All right, so we're yes. Also, Bernard Pollard injuring people did actually lead to worse outcomes for his team because it did put Tom Brady on the field.
Yes, that's true.
So before we get to special teams real quick, I want to ask, Devin Allen got screwed, right?
Yeah. I wanted him to be on the team. I'm so mad that he didn't get.
There's 4 receivers.
Yeah,
what's going on?
They kept Covey. They kept Covey on the team over him. And Covey's like a good punt returner, but Covey's also like 26 years old. He's like classic. Anytime you draft a player from Utah, there's like always a chance that they're no longer on their parents' health insurance because they're so old. And because they've been on a mission for like 3 years or something. Right. And Covey's like 25 or 26 years old. He's fine though, but Allen is an Olympian. And they had that.
Which, speaking of getting screwed, Devin Allen got screwed in the track championships as well.
Did he?
Do you not know about this? Come on, man. So I think this was in the finals of the World Championships. He gets off the line just as soon as the gun goes off, and there's a rule apparently. And I'm not a track expert, so listeners, please give me a little bit of latitude. But my understanding is that it is judged that if you get off the blocks within 0.10 seconds, I want to say 0.10 seconds, if you're faster than that, that is deemed a false start because it is apparently the ruling that you cannot no one has a reaction time like that, so you are beginning before the gun begins. Now, scientifically, that is not the case. Apparently, we can get all the way down to genuine reaction times of 0.08 seconds. And so he got off the block at 0.999 seconds, or something like, or 0.099. That's it, 0.099 seconds. So he was 0.001 second faster than the rule, the relatively unscientific rule, that even though you come after the gun, it is determined that you were too fast to have heard the gun and come off the block. And so he was disqualified because this was, I don't know how the false start rules, but it was like the second false start or something like that. He was disqualified from participating in the final. How do you not know this?
I don't know. I just consume news about football, basketball, and just generally how
he's a football player. It seems relevant.
It was. I don't know about other things that football players do outside of football generally.
Okay, well, I'm gonna send you an article on this.
So you're saying
I probably should have read the article before I
he was
reported on it.
punished for having exceptional mental agility.
Correct.
Wow, that's unbelievable.
Yeah. He celebrated his preseason touchdown with hurdles, right? Like, this seems like a guy who like lives. Here it is. Like I said, Allen ran the 110-meter hurdles 12.84 seconds in June, the third fastest in history. He made the finals of the World Championships before getting disqualified as a computer determined he had a false start in the event. Allen's reaction time was 1/1000th of a second faster than the threshold. Mind you, he got off after the gunshot, but yeah. This was like dominating Twitter for a while.
Did it happen the week that I was driving across the country?
I don't know. I don't pay attention to you.
It could have happened then, but I have no idea. That sucks. Well, I wanted him to make the team because, in my opinion, you always want a guy with that kind of speed on your roster. Give him a reverse,
literally world record setting.
Let him touch the ball once a game and see what happens, But the Eagles clearly are not brave enough for that.
Wow, there's a whole article complex. This is a whole news cycle. People had discussions about this sort of thing. So I'm going to send you this really dense piece that's not easy to read on air about it, and I'm just going to let my summary of it stand. Hopefully, I was accurate. All right, I sent it to you.
Thank you.
Okay. So Devin Allen should have made the team. He also should have been allowed to compete in the World Championship final. He probably would have medaled, as he is one of the fastest people in the world at 110 meters. So special teams, any worries?
No, actually. The special teams unit is really solid. Second year player Zach McPherson is looking very, very good in terms as like a kick coverage guy, both as a punt gunner and also in kick returns.
He'd be good at that.
What?
Devin Allen. I said, who'd be good at that?
Devin Allen would be.
Devin Allen, yeah.
But I mean, McPherson was, when he was drafted, it was kind of always going to be like, this guy's going to be a good special teams player, and then he was. And then ancient kick returner Britton Covey is good at returning punts so far. Jake Elliott is a very constant and solid kicker. He's not exceptional in any way, but he's definitely, I think, in like the top half of the league in terms of being a kicker. So,
how do you pronounce the punter's name?
Aaron Sipos.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it's pretty phonetic. He's good too. He's Australian, so you kind of trust him to be good at that.
He can probably tackle too. Though,
right? Yeah, he definitely can. Yeah, we replaced one Australian with another because we had Cameron Johnson before.
6'2", 212. Man,
yeah,
punters,
built
man.
like a linebacker.
Yeah.
So the special teams are really solid. Michael Clay has that unit real solid, and I'm not. That's the least of my concerns. I think going up against the Vikings, my main concern is what the Vikings offense, the Kevin O'Connell offense is going to do to the defense.
So we did skip over that. What is your big concern about the defense versus that offense?
I would say Dalvin Cook running for 1,000,000 yards.
Yeah, after watching DeAndre Swift.
Yeah, I like DeAndre Swift is a good running back. He is by all measure a good running back. Dalvin Cook is one of the 5 best running backs in the NFL, and he got 20 carries against the Packers. So, if he gets that sort of volume against the Eagles, he's probably going to put up pretty good numbers unless, they make some adjustments on the defensive line. And that's a big if. In terms of the passing game, this is going to be, an early test in the season for what the secondary can do. Once again, I think the Vikings are a good quarterback away from being a legitimately very good team, I think.
Oh, Kirk Cousins is a good quarterback. That's not
no. So what I'm saying is, like, for the Lions, it's hard. Okay. It's hard to measure how good the secondary is against Jared Goff, because Jared Goff is only like okay. Like the Lions' passing weapons are good. They have a really good group of pass catchers, but Goff is only so fine. Kirk Cousins is a good quarterback. And you can clip that and put it on Twitter if you want if you want to hold me to that.
Easy. Done.
What?
Don't worry about
it. Kirk Cousins is a good quarterback. And, with Justin Jefferson, with Adam Thielen, that trio of guys is going to be able to test the Eagles secondary in a way that the Lions passing game was not able to. So it's going to be, if Justin Jefferson was able to make mincemeat of an objectively talented Packers secondary, like I am concerned about what he could do against the Eagles secondary, which is, I think, just on paper, not as good as the Packers secondary.
Yeah. On paper. I think the Packers probably screwed up their game plan, but it sounds like you don't have a lot of confidence that the Eagles won't screw up their particular game plan.
Yeah, exactly.
Because, the Packers, I think, had the horses to slow down the Vikings passing game, and they just weren't used effectively. Very much it seems like the Eagles have the horses to slow down the Vikings running game, and you're just worried that they won't be used effectively. Because, these are good run defending players.
Yes. If they, I think they could, sell out against the run. Well, and then that brings in a new question. It's maybe it's even better if Dalvin Cook is the person who goes off against the Eagles and they're able to limit the passing game. But I'm not entirely sure about that. But either way, I'm not super confident that Gannon is going to be the person to be able to game plan for this, which means that
head coach candidate John Gannon.
Yeah,
that guy.
I wish that if the Broncos had hired him,
they might have won that game too.
They might have won that game because Gannon is dumb, but he's not as dumb as Nathaniel Hackett.
Evidently.
Yeah. That's a low bar. It's a very low bar to set. And if he went to the Broncos, or he also interviewed for the Vikings job, right?
He did. He was a dark horse candidate for the Vikings.
Yeah. If he had gone anywhere that he had interviewed, Vic Fangio would be the defensive coordinator right now. So
yeah, he showed up in training camp. He just wanted to hang out for a bit.
Yeah.
What was the deal with that?
Yeah, I know.
He's just hey, I don't know if you guys heard. I'm free. Yeah. I'm available.
What Vic Fangio would do with Jordan Davis and Hassan Reddick and TJ Edwards and Josh Sweat, it would look very different than whatever.
I would imagine.
Yeah. Well, we can only pray. But yeah,
you think he gets fired partway through the season, John Gannon?
If more games like the Lions game happens, yeah, absolutely. You could tell that there was disappointment with the way that the defense performed, as there absolutely should be. And regardless of what we think about Jalen Hurts, it's very clear that the Eagles have high expectations for this season. They wouldn't have made that CJ Gardner-Johnson trade unless they thought that they were in a position to, win 12 games and make a deep run in the playoffs. And if it's through 5-6 games in the season and the defense is either losing them games or getting them close to losing games, I think like Howie Roseman would probably step in and being like, I'm not going to let you be the person who ruins the season, because it's clearly not a roster problem. Nobody over the last 3 years has given Howie Roseman more than me, and he has built a phenomenal roster at this point.
So you're wrong, is what you're saying.
I'm 100% wrong. Well, no, he proved that people can change. That's what I'm.
Yeah, so I was right.
He's the first person to ever change.
Him and Josh Allen.
Him and Josh Allen, and also Carson Wentz twice.
I'm still not convinced that 2017 was real. So
yeah, I don't feel like any part of that year was real. Honestly, it was just a mirage.
All right, so the Eagles are favored by 2 points at home. I believe the Eagles haven't won a Week 2 game since 2016 or something. And the Vikings do not. Kirk Cousins doesn't win Monday Night Football games. I think he's 2-9 or something like that. So. The NFL is putting their best foot forward with this primetime game. What do you think happens? What's your score prediction?
It is going to be a high-scoring affair. I think the Eagles are going to win, and it's going to be 31-28.
31-28.
Yeah.
Goodness.
I think there's a lot of fireworks in this game.
I mean, that sounds like a lot of fun to cover.
Yeah, I
so.
mean, I'm hoping it's going to be fun. If it's not fun, I'm going to be miserable.
Yeah, that's generally
the
how it
two,
works.
in terms of my agenda, generally, there are two good outcomes: the Eagles
Right.
win, or the Eagles lose, but Jalen Hurts plays really well. Because if Hurts plays really well and they lose, then I can continue to hate Jonathan Gannon, because it'll inevitably be his fault that they lost.
What if he plays well, but it's just like a bunch of drops from AJ Brown?
I don't know. I might just be devastated then. That's not a good outcome. I'm telling you. So the two good outcomes are
So the good outcome is not necessarily that the Eagles lose, Jalen Hurts plays well, but rather that the offense plays well with Jalen Hurts playing well.
Yeah, because I'm pro Nick Sirianni, anti Jonathan Gannon.
Okay.
Yeah.
So long as we lay out the terms of art, because everybody's biased, we just need to know what biases.
Yeah, I'm extremely biased, but I'm very transparent about what my biases are.
Right. That's important. We've discussed this before. On a podcast that I guess we no longer talk about. I don't know.
Yeah, the podcast that will not be named until we inevitably decide to revive it when something horrible happens.
In like 3 years.
Yeah,
we might
6
be able
months.
To. Yeah. Cool. Well, where can people find you?
They can find me on Twitter at @thebenetton, and they can find my writing on Bleeding Green Nation.
All right. Apparently, Ben has a TikTok. He refuses to share it. He does not like that the app exists. If you want to hear more, listen to the Patreon episode or the Christmas clip episode. I don't know which one that's going to show up in. I had a lot of fun talking to him about that, and also a lot of fun bullying him in the DMs and informing him about players that are on the team he covers.
Yes, on the practice squad of the team I cover.
Yeah. Appreciate it so much, man. Have a good
you
one.
as well.
All right, let's go to the mailbag. And the first question is from the Browns Massage Therapist Union. How far do we estimate Jordan Davis can throw Bradbury?
So if anyone remembers like the viral clip of Jordan Davis and Cam, I guess Ben told me it's pronounced Jurgens. That feels wrong, but we'll go with it. It's his last name, not mine. Anyway, by the way, people who like understand Arabic probably understand that I've been pronouncing my name wrong the whole time. So who am I to complain about this sort of thing?
We had a bonus episode devoted to you attempting to pronounce your name correctly and failing. Yeah, I recall that.
I succeeded. I just didn't like how all of you responded to it. That's what happened.
It's not RF. It's not RF.
No. Good Lord. Okay. Yeah, absolutely not. We are moving on. That has to be a microaggression of some sort. I'm canceling it.
Oh, come on. Do I get canceled?
I'm going to put the over-under. I'm going to put the over-under at 6.5 yards.
I get canceled for quoting you. This is what I get.
Well, just like you might get canceled for quoting a rap song? Is that what you're saying?
Are you pop culture? Are you my father? None of this makes sense at all. Also from the Browns Massage Therapist Union, how concerned should we be over the Booth injury? Seems like Evans was conservative in his coverage during preseason. What should we expect if he has to play a larger role?
I think that we should have a reasonable amount of concern. I don't think it's like a season-ending injury or anything that might impact him long-term as a quad injury. That it tends to follow, things like ankle injuries, right? Because you're loading differently as a result of accommodating an injury. So the way the Vikings have talked about it, it does not seem like it's a big deal. The last two times Kevin O'Connell has discussed injuries, he has been accurate in his description. So for now, he gets a little bit of a pass in assessing future injuries and future injury potential. And so it doesn't seem like it's a big deal. You'll be back within a couple of weeks. Certainly the fact that they didn't put him on injured reserve, I think tells us something too. So there's that. I think with Evans, one thing that stood out to me is that technically on the depth chart that the Vikings have released, Evans was already ahead of Booth pre-injury. So it is possible that Evans is playing well enough that is not really kind of part of the conversation. It's not a huge concern. I don't think that's actually the case, but certainly that was interesting. Evans with the 5 snaps that he played last week, 6 maybe. He made like one mistake, so it was like PFF grades pretty bad. But for the most part, I'm not enormously concerned. Like if I were to compare this to 2019 Chris Boyd or something like that, I would be much more comfortable with Evans out there. So it's not great, obviously. You're going down the depth chart, but it's also, I don't think, catastrophic based off of how he's played.
Next question is going to be from Swedman Bob, who asks, how much info on systems, etc., can a team, let's say the Eagles, obtain by claiming someone off the practice squad the week before a game?
What was really interesting on which Hard Knocks was it? It was the one that the Browns Hard Knocks, right? Michael Kendricks was waived from the Eagles, and then the Browns, I want to say, picked him up, right? Because Carl Nassib was also in that season. And I remember because of all the stock advice. And in that, we saw just a small snippet of Michael Kendricks giving a scouting report on Nick Foles. And the editors, obviously, they did a really great job where they interspliced the things that he was saying with something that had occurred in the preseason game that had actually happened. And he was describing the arc and trajectory of Nick Foles' throws and how it can kind of throw a defender off if you're not used to it. And he described it like a teardrop shape, right? It was really funny because I don't know if any of you remember this, but Eagles fans were a little bit sensitive for some reason. And they took this as like a huge criticism, like as if he was saying that Nick Foles is a bad quarterback. My recollection of that episode was not that he was saying that, but that he was like giving a scouting report in fairly neutral language. And it turned out to be helpful because they picked him off using that information, right? So that wasn't any detail or information about offensive systems, right? But it was a scouting report given from weeks of practice against a particular quarterback. So that might play a role, right? Now, Nick Foles was less of a known quantity than Kirk Cousins, so that's probably going to be a little bit less useful. But the fact that, they grabbed like an edge rusher off the practice squad and not a defensive back, I find that interesting because an edge rusher is not obligated to know all the coverage shells. And so he may not know all the coverage shells. I don't know. Instead, it seemed like they wanted to get an understanding of the way the Vikings set their fronts, which in this case would mean, in what situations would the Vikings want to play this front? What are the responsibilities of an edge rusher, of a defensive tackle on this kind of play when they line up like this? And they can go through the film and ask them some questions about kind of what these individual players are expected to do on these plays. And I think that actually is a somewhat substantial advantage. I asked Ben about this in the show, and it sounds like the Eagles do this all the time. The Vikings have done this occasionally as well. But the Eagles apparently do this all the time where they sign a player from a practice squad for like a week, get a scouting report. And the Eagles have done fairly well in that span of time. So I think that there is a fair amount of information to be gleaned. And I think that the surprise that the Vikings showcased against the Packers, which was weird to me because I thought the Packers have done this before too. I would think that the Packers would try to grab a Viking and get as much information as they could. That surprise will not really be there, I think, at least when it comes to the way the Eagles' offensive line will be handling the Vikings' defensive line.
Next question is going to be from 1960s Goldie Can't Hurt You. Yes, how long is the shelf life of a dunk like 38-7? On the one hand, I feel like clinging to a playoff win 5 years ago is a little silly. But on the other hand, I still never miss a chance to tell Saints fans that Keenum is going to try to work the ball to the sidelines.
So the difference here is that the Saints are a repugnant organization and the Vikings are holy and innocent. So obviously, Eagles fans attempting to dunk on the Vikings, that's bad. Why would you do that? Vikings fans dunking on the Saints, that's normal and expected. And it's something that we around here like to call accountability.
I mean, that's something that the whole family can get behind.
Right. Yeah, it's wholesome. It's important. It's part of developing a culture that builds respect for people. I think that's just like, categorically, this is a good thing. So the context always matters here, right? I think that, if Cowboys fans, wanted to talk about the Hail Mary in 1975, that'd be pretty weird. That was 40 years ago, 50 years ago. Goodness. That's, you've won Super Bowls since then. Get over yourself. The Vikings don't have much to go off of. I don't know if you've been following this team for a while, but they don't have anything. The Minneapolis Miracle is the most significant event in Vikings football history in the past decade, right? Like since 2009. So, let's get to keep that one. The Eagles, if I recall, did something immediately after that game that is a more significant event in that franchise history. Grow up, I think, is the difference here. So, obviously, I'm a little bit biased because I hate Ben, and Ben is an Eagles fan, and so I am motivated here to be harsh. But I also hate Benjamin Solak and Michael Kist, who are also Eagles fans. And so given that sample size, it must be a problem with the Eagles fan base and not me. And so they deserve not to be able to have these kinds of dunks.
Well, just on the whole, the Vikings fan base doesn't go out and like punch Santa or punch horses. So
if you bring up the Santa thing, like throwing batteries at Santa, whatever it was, maybe I'm combining two different events, but who cares? There are Eagles fans that are like, well, you don't know how Santa was acting, which like is a very "are we the baddies" moment. Like that Santa was an a-hole. Like, bro, just take the L, or just like, hey, that was like 30 years ago. Like, just say something else.
They're just so tired of being told about what happened with Santa. What a bunch of snowflakes, just ridiculous. Just the absolute worst. William Wrigley asks, the offense seemed to vary tempo a bit in the Green Bay game, more than I remember them doing. A few possessions where they were very quick to the line, even if they didn't ultimately run a play quickly. Was this a thing?
You are correct to have noticed that. The Vikings in the Mike Zimmer era would very often be slow to the line of scrimmage and have the longest or second longest time between plays. I think the longest was always whatever team Phillip Rivers was on, and then Cam Newton also had a very long time between plays. That's just something that you do to potentially gain an advantage on defensive offsides. It's something that you do to allow the offense to survey the field and get a good understanding of what's going on, because the defense, as the clock winds down, has less and less time to disguise its intentions. There's advantages to this, and the Vikings were pretty consistent about it. But here, Kevin O'Connell has mentioned briefly a few times here and there that, tempo is a tool that the offense has because they get to set the pace. And if they have any opportunities to use that to their advantage, they're going to. And it sounds like in the game itself that as they were going, their own players were saying, let's go. I think they were saying tempo or something. O'Connell relayed this specifically as an anecdote from the game where players wanted a faster tempo to take advantage of a big play or something, and that's what they did. So certainly there was a variance in tempo. And if you go back to some of the more significant figures in NFL history when it comes to tempo, at least in recent history, people like Chip Kelly, who ran like the blur offense at Oregon and stuff like that, and you ask him about like tempo, he says it's not about going fast, right? Which is something that he did with the Eagles, something he did with Oregon, something he kind of did with the 49ers. He would go fast a lot, but he would say it's about controlling pace, varying your tempo, and having different ways to use tempo to get your opponent off kilter. Obviously, we saw in the Chargers game that there's a downside to trying to go at 100 miles per hour, which is that Gerald Everett was like gassed, wasn't ready. It clearly wasn't like fit at the time to run a route, ran a route pretty lazily as a result of it, and that resulted in a 99-yard pick six for a 7th-round rookie. Everything, like there's an ebb and flow to everything. There's pros and cons, but it very much seems like the Vikings want to use tempo as a weapon that the offense uniquely has access to.
Jack Rackham asks, from a psychological standpoint, who is benefiting most from Mike Zimmer's departure? Kirk Cousins, Greg Joseph, or Chris Thomason?
Incredible question. Greg Joseph is about to have a career year. So my instinct is to say him. Kirk Cousins is like happy, I think. I don't know. It's hard to tell with him, right? But I feel like he's less miserable. here's the thing about Chris Thomas, and that I think that some people understand and some people don't. Like, he doesn't care. Like, he just does not care, which is one of the reasons I do enjoy having him in that press room. Is that he's not going to get phased by what a person thinks of him for asking a question. That can sometimes result in rudeness, and I don't always love kind of the way that manifests. But sometimes it means that he's asking questions that need to be asked, and he's taking the bullet for the rest of us. So there's definitely value in that, and it protects us. So in some ways, he's being a little bit of a hero, and taking all the damage. So I don't hate that, and it's really cool that he doesn't care sometimes. So from a psychological standpoint, I don't think Chris Thomas is any better or worse off. It's really just a race between Cousins and Joseph, and I think it's going to be Joseph here. I mean, he I had a career year. I just feel like a special teams coach coming out and saying, "Yeah, this is one of the best kickers I've ever seen in my life." Yeah, that's got to feel good, right?
Let's go to PMH, who asks, which team does Jalen Hurts hurt the most? Eagles or Vikings? Apologies in advance for the lame joke. I'm a dad.
If you didn't say apologies in advance for the lame joke, I'm a dad, this would have hit a lot harder. So just in the future, don't backpedal until you need to.
Yes.
That's my advice. I mean, it sounds like Hurts is a good quarterback now. I don't know. You heard my skepticism in the interview. I am not convinced. He did have a good game against the Lions. Counterpoint to the Lions. He had a couple of good throws. Ben admitted that he's not an accurate quarterback. It's really kind of all the other elements of what he does that seem to set him apart. But I didn't think that he was particularly good at doing stuff like blitz pickup. So I don't know, man. It sounds like the consensus is that he's growing as a quarterback and he's playing pretty well. So I'm going to have to probably defer to that, but I do have a little bit of skepticism on that point. So I guess he hurts the Vikings more. Plus, I mean, he's like a running quarterback. I just wouldn't want to okay, so who's the last running quarterback that like the Vikings comfortably corralled? I'm trying to remember. I guess kind of Lamar Jackson last year.
Last year there was Lamar Jackson, but he wasn't really corralled. He was still running all over the goddamn place. They played Seattle last year, didn't they?
Well, I wouldn't call Russell a running quarterback, but hey, what about Cam Newton, right, at TCF Bank Stadium? Mm-hmm. They did a great job against him. But they got run over by Josh Allen, like in a very literal sense.
Yeah.
Which is famously, what was that rule 2? Don't send me more Josh Allen gifts.
Yep. And every time Aaron Rodgers escapes the pocket, you're screaming, he's moving that way, and it goes poorly to everybody.
Yeah. But everyone remembers the Steve Young and Michael Vick clips, even if you weren't there, just because they get played endlessly in highlight reels. So I don't know. There's a little bit of bad mojo there.
Just a tad. Professor Poop asks, we all know what Eagles fans are, which is incredibly poopy individuals. Say an Eagles fan in 3 different universes chucked a sock full of batteries at the Viking sideline. Which of the following universes would lead us to the least poopy final record?
My God.
Number 1, Kirk is hit in the head. He misses 2 games with a concussion, but comes back and genuinely believes he is Brett Favre.
Like A to Z, that's his name. He takes on the accent. He believes he has Brett Favre's history. He believes he set some records at Southern Miss.
Has some apologizing to do to the state of Mississippi.
We'll talk about that in a second, actually. But I just want it or he believes that as a player prototype, he's Brett Favre. That's an important question for this. Okay, what's number 2?
Number 2, Kevin O'Connell is hit in the head. This injury unlocks another level of play calling for him, and he becomes the best OC. But he also inexplicably has to call one CJ Ham play every single drive, no matter what.
Okay. So I assume that means plays where CJ Ham not just either carries the ball, but would be like the primary target, not a play where he's on the field. I feel like that's a little bit too easy.
Correct.
Right?
Yep. Something drawn up for him as the primary.
Right. Yeah. And I think if I wanted to wiggle out of this, I'd say designing a screen pass where he's the lead blocker out wide, because it requires, the unique talents of CJ Ham to make that happen, kind of like Kyle Juszczyk. But that's less fun. So we're gonna say CJ Ham is supposed to get the ball.
Yeah.
All right. 3.
And number 3, Joseph is hitting the leg instead of hurting him. It actually fixes an unknown hitch in his leg and makes it so that he hits literally every field goal for the rest of his career, limited to 62 yards. Otherwise, he could miss.
Right. So he cannot set records with this superpower. But I feel like you'd begin trusting him a little bit more. Like, I assume that he doesn't become a normal kicker at 63 yards. He becomes the type of kicker that from 62 in doesn't miss. And so at 63 would have a pretty reasonable shot, maybe a 45% chance or something.
Becomes that
of
kid,
making that.
He becomes that kid in Rookie of the Year.
Right.
Boy, there's there's an obscure reference.
Yeah. Wow. Goodness.
Jeez. Apologies for that. If anybody there is graying and heard that and understood the reference.
So I'm going to assume, for the purposes of this one, the Vikings don't have that knowledge that he is like metaphysically incapable. That's definitely the wrong word to use here. I don't care. Incapable of missing a kick, right? Because I think it changes your strategy knowing that your guy literally cannot miss from 56.
Yeah.
Right. They'll just be happy knowing that he didn't after the fact, right? I assume by year 9 they'll have figured it out, but at least like in the short term. And this is a question for the best record by the end of the year, it sounds like. So that's how we're going to approach this question. Okay, so those are the parameters for those 3.
Mm-hmm.
I think the 2 missed games for Kirk is big. I actually really like this question a lot. I think it's really well balanced. I think you could make an argument for any of these. The 2 missed games for Kirk is a lot. His ability to become a lot more aggressive about, hitting deep windows, staying on, your best receiver, managing a 2-minute drill, kind of ignoring, some of the elements that would make a lesser quarterback kind of pull back, even though his arm strength allows him to do that. Being aggressive when it comes to changing protections, calling quarterback scrambles, defrauding the state of Mississippi, all the kinds of aggressiveness that you associate with Brett Favre.
Truth.
That right. that I think would definitely lead to more wins. The Kevin O'Connell one, I think I'm going to go with, though. I think being the best offensive coordinator that you could possibly be would result, with the talent that the Vikings have, even though you have like someone like Brett Favre, Kirk Cousins, definitely not Brett Favre. Something reminiscent of the 2016 Falcons, right? Like that seems like the analogy here. And they led the league in points. Kyle Shanahan is still making money off of that run. So if you're the best offensive coordinator you could possibly be, yeah, I just like, okay, fine. You have to run it for 3 yards with CJ Ham, and maybe that's going to kill 1 or 2 of your drives. But the Falcons ended most of those drives with at least a field goal, if not a touchdown. Like the scoring rate was above 50%. That's wild. Okay, fine. We'll take a scoring rate of 48% then, right? We're going to lose a couple here or there because of a 3-yard run from CJ Ham. I think that's worth it.
Speaking of the Favre thing, before we get into any of that, I would just like to apologize to the listeners of Norse Code for last episode, where I said that Brett Favre was sacked on a play. For whatever reason, I have a learning disability, and this disability makes it so that when I talk about Aaron Rodgers, sometimes I say Brett Favre, and I apologize for this. This is my problem, and I'm trying to deal with this, and I just can't. I'm sorry. This is not the first time I've done this. It's not the 40th time I've done it. I apologize. I suck. Let's get to the next question, because it's also about Brett Favre. If Kirk were, this is from Kenneth Allen, if Kirk were involved in a political scandal a la Brett Favre, what would it be? Would it be spending taxpayer money on Kohl's shirts?
Apparently, this is a Patagonia shirt. Done some deep journalism on this shirt. Love Vikings Twitter, minus Luke Braun. And let's also minus Nick Olson. You're on alert.
Well, he did have to change his picture to a picture of Luke for a bit, so
that's true. Yeah, so there you go. Right, it all comes back together. No, I think so. Here's something that I don't know that many people know, but my understanding is, and if I'm wrong, let me know. But my understanding is that Kirk Cousins, who grew up in Holland, Michigan, his family is at least acquaintances with, if not friends with, Betsy DeVos, the former Secretary of Education. And I feel like if there is a political scandal we're going to foment out of this using that knowledge, it would be fraud related to charter or private schools, right? Because one of Betsy DeVos's goals was to lead to greater privatization of education. I'm going to let you all judge kind of whether or not that's a good thing or a bad thing, but I think that by itself is an unambiguously true statement. Now, if we're going to already assume on face that there's going to be a political scandal, then Kirk Cousins would use his connections with DeVos to invest in private or charter schools that don't exist and personally enrich him and his family. I think that would be kind of the most Cousins way to go about things. They would, of course, be, given the fact that his father is a pastor, religious schools, but again, they do not exist, so it kind of doesn't matter. The money that he pockets from that would be used to upgrade his Windstar van and to buy more shirts from Kohl's.
Question. Does he do something incredibly stupid in a text message, like say, can the press get a hold of this?
I think that he would use snail mail, but yes.
For those, the Favre thing has been kind of simmering for the last year or two about a potential like welfare fraud situation, like investigation on it. It blew wide open this week when text messages came out about this, and it's like every bad criminal movie you've ever seen, where like the criminal's like, just in case, what happens if I do burglarize this home? Like,
yeah, let's what was it in The Wire? Are you taking notes on a federal conspiracy?
On a criminal conspiracy?
Yeah.
And he throws the notebook, like, you idiot.
I think Cousins, it gets blown wide open because Cousins wrote it down, but it's pen and paper, I think, is how he does it, not a text message. I mean, Favre has already made a number of mistakes specifically involving text messages.
This is one more to the pile.
Yeah, it's to type, for sure. My understanding of the Favre scandal, plural, is it's multiple. One, he owes $1.1 million in back taxes to the state of Mississippi. That is independent, apparently, of the next two things, which one of them also involves the figure $1.1 million, which made this kind of weird to look up. But he also earned $1.1 million in speaking fees, which he never spoke, right? Like, he just never gave the speeches that he was paid to give. And those speaking fees, I believe, came out of a different fund than the one I'm about to discuss, but also would not have been an appropriate usage of those funds had he given those speeches anyway. The third scandal involves at least $5 million that I don't know how much he got, if any, but he was part of a scheme, I guess, maybe is the way to put it. Allegedly, this is all alleged. I said the word alleged the whole time. He was part of a scheme, allegedly, where he would help build a volleyball arena for the University of Southern Mississippi using money earmarked for welfare of some sort. And my understanding specifically is like a program that would disperse funds to underserved and needy communities. Not necessarily direct payments. I actually don't know like why you couldn't just do direct payments, but that's I guess a question for another podcast that currently doesn't exist. But a nonprofit designed to redistribute or disperse funds, but instead was used to build a volleyball stadium. At the time, his daughter was a volleyball player for the University of Southern Mississippi, and it seems as if part of that scheme meant that he also personally, as the owner of these nonprofits, could pocket some of that money. And in the text messages, he was like, hey, is this going to be on record anywhere? And the person responding, whose name I forgot, said, no, this is not necessarily public. And then later on said, hey, just checked in with the governor. And the governor says it's okay. And he's like, yeah, great. I needed to hear that. So it's very clear that he knew he was doing something wrong. Not that like him not knowing would absolve him, because look, you're working with millions of dollars. Like the dumb country guy who doesn't know what a nickel defense is doesn't really cut it here.
The idea that this was all being done via text message, not
Great, phenomenal.
More proof that the man never watched The Wire. It's just if we're bringing this out here, it
does not strike me as a Wire viewer.
No, you never do stuff like that over the phone, you idiot. Spencer asks, if you could replace any body part with a kitchen appliance, what would you replace and with what appliance?
So James and I were discussing this very briefly before the show, before deciding, having a live discussion would be better for the podcast. And instinctively, my brain was like, oh, I would replace my forearm with a blender, mostly because the most logical limb to replace is your left forearm. And the first kitchen appliance that came to mind was a blender. And I don't think it's actually a good one. It's just the first one. But I do know that in order for this to be interesting, it has to be an appliance and not like a utensil, right?
Right. You can't have tongs.
It can't be tongs. Can't be a spatula. That's all too easy, right? The second assumption I'm going to make here is that power is not an issue, right? Maybe you have to like eat more to sustain the calories it takes to spin a blade. And I think that's probably like the third issue probably is that you don't have to worry about like travel. Like if I'm going through airport security and I've got a blender attached to me, no one's going to be like, you have to take the blender off your arm. You just like, hey, doctor's note, I was born with a blender here. And the TSA just has to be like, well, I guess you have to fly because, look, I can't finish the sentence. That doesn't actually make any sense, but it's not a problem. I think I might still go in the blender direction, but instead of like a cup blender, like a stick blender or an immersion blender. It's great for self-defense. It's a little bit longer. If I don't turn it on, I could probably still stab things to pick them up. But typing would still be difficult, but I can't imagine that there's an appliance that we could pick. I'm not going to type any better with a toaster. In fact, I imagine I would type a lot worse. So I can't really think of an appliance better than that. I don't want an Instant Pot. I don't think a coffee grinder would be great. Plus, technically, if I do a good enough job of modulating speed and stuff like that, I could do a decent job of being a blade grinder, even though you want a burr grinder. Dusty, please don't talk to me about grinders after I bring them up. Probably not an electric kettle, although you need shaped the right way. That'd be pretty cool if you had like a gooseneck spout. I can't.
Left foot as a microwave.
Oh, that's good.
It'd be weird and awesome.
You could replace just the center part of your chest with the microwave, and that's just your arc reactor.
And when you do Christmas, you immediately can become Krang from the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles as your outfit just the entire time. You just have that built in.
Okay, that's the answer. Oh my God. All this talk about blenders and grinders, which now that I think about it, I'm just picking bladed appliances.
You had Eve 6 on the mind. That's all that was going on. You were just blending.
Yeah. Hey, I don't know if you know this.
I swear to God, if it's about them following you.
They follow me on Twitter. Hard to blender song. No, I just, the last appliance I used also was a blender. But the microwave, fantastic. Especially the Krang or Tony Stark idea. Mm-hmm. Beautiful. You win this round.
Mayo Coffee asks, Arif, as a writer, what's the closest you get to taking a deep shot down the field to a well-covered receiver? Metaphorically.
A lot of my stuff gets deleted by editors when I submit it. If you're in the Norse Code Discord, which you have to be a Patreon member to do, I did very recently complain about an editorial change to a piece. Words were added, not subtracted. So in this case, I feel like I have a particular grievance here. But in this case, I think it has to do with like pitches and story ideas. I'm not going to reveal what the story is. I just kind of want to write it and let you read it. I'm not going to tell you kind of what I'm planning. But I did pitch something to Pro Football Network immediately. They were like, hey, Arif, they went through all my references. We went through a couple rounds of interviews. We talked about kind of what the vision will be. And then they offered me the job, and I was like, okay, great. Now that I have the job, here's an insane story idea. When you read it, you'll know what it is. But that's it. That was my moonshot. I was like, okay, let's see what my boundaries are here as a writer.
I just got here. Let's see what the checkbook looks like.
Right? Yeah. No. Exactly. It's you're heat checking, right? Like you show up in an opponent's court. You're up against their best defender, and you launch a 26-footer, right? Like that's you know normal.
Sometimes in prison, you just have to go up and beat up the biggest guy. You know, that guy's really tired of getting his butt kicked. Mike Ellis asks, how cool would it be to exercise our demons by beating 3 of our most hated teams in the first 4 weeks? Packers, Eagles, and Saints. If only the Falcons were in the schedule too. Who would you add to the hate list?
So I don't personally see the Falcons as really on the list of hated franchises, because I think everyone in recounting this story feels that it is self-inflicted, right? Like there's no... The Falcons aren't the villains. They're the bystanders that happen to benefit, is my feel on the way 2022 Vikings fans kind of interpret the Gary Anderson game. Hey, we even call it the Gary Anderson game, right? It's about a person.
This isn't Bounty Gate. This is the Gary Anderson kick.
Right, exactly, right? I would think that the Cowboys are actually a more hated franchise for Vikings fans than the Falcons, right? Because the Cowboys have been much more successful in, I shouldn't say in recent years, but have been more successful over a period of time. Whereas, the Falcons doing well is just like, good for them, right? Like at least somebody's winning, I guess. Not the feeling at the moment, but like, just generally speaking, you just like the Falcons are kind of a snake bitten franchise. And so
the Cowboys, the least.
Right.
Jesus.
Yeah.
That documentary.
Like a whole 7-part John Boyce documentary. Which Luke Braun, everyone knows that you lifted the style from John Boyce. I'm just going to I don't think you'll even deny it, because this is not like a serious accusation or anything like that. I think you know it, but it should be made known that this is the case. But even John Boyce said that he would never do a Vikings, or I shouldn't say never, that he didn't want to do a Vikings one because it would somehow be too depressing. A guy who just did like a 5-part, 7-part, whatever Falcons documentary was like, the Vikings would be too depressing. Like, can you imagine? That's wild. So I can't put the Falcons on the list. My read on the vibe of Vikings fans is that the Falcons are not an enemy, but the Cowboys are, even though like the first transgression the Cowboys had was like in 1975. It's partly because the Cowboys are just a hateable team. A lot of people that are very annoying like the Cowboys a lot. It's not really the case with the Falcons. Falcons fans seem to just be cool, honestly. And the Cowboys get all this national spotlight, seemingly undeservedly so. So it just kind of like every time the Cowboys come up. So I would think the Cowboys take a bigger role there. I can't think, which, that's week 11, right? So if they just moved them up the schedule, can't think of anyone else that's kind of really at that level, right? Like the Packers, Saints, Cowboys, Bears. If there's another team that you all can think of, like, because obviously the Vikings lost to the Chiefs in the Super Bowl, which I think stings more than the Raiders and the Steelers Super Bowl losses. But I don't know that there's a long rivalry between these AFC teams and the Vikings. Like if they had met multiple times in the Super Bowl and lost a number of those times, I think maybe that would be kind of a bigger deal. But yeah, I can't think of anything along those lines.
Yeah,
certainly I don't put the Falcons on that level.
Duke's Code asks, why is Ben DiNucci still a free agent when at least 4 teams, probably now 5, including his former team, Bears, 49ers, and Packers, are desperate for quality starting quarterbacks?
Well, it's a conspiracy against our founding fathers, first of all. But second, hey, Jameis Madison leading the FBS in points per game. Like, period. Like, the fact that they haven't played a Power 5 school, that's also propaganda. So let's not listen to that.
Yeah, I mean,
they're leading.
Can you imagine following a team that's stuck in FCS?
That sounds like torture. Sounds boring.
Why would you do that? It wouldn't make any sense.
And anytime you play an FBS team, that's like a whole event. It's like, grow up already,
Yeah, Dukes have been doing it all year.
Yeah, so technically, I don't think they've played an FBS team yet, but it's on the schedule. It's on the schedule.
They are.
Leading the FBS in points. All right, that's the important part. Anyway, Ben DiNucci is a tragic victim of woke cancel culture. The fact that James Madison himself was not a good person.
I was going to say, carefully wade into this.
Look, I mean, like, on some of the controversies surrounding the nation's founding, I would argue that on the most important ones, he was probably on the wrong side there, right? So let's put that out there, and then also say that we should not be critical of historical figures at all. That's a long-standing stance of mine that I believe.
Norse Code listeners have known that since episode 4. Long time.
Yeah,
listeners.
Absolutely, for sure. And this is not a convenient stance for me to take just to cheer for a team that happened to beat NDSU once. But should have 2 other times the refs hadn't. We've been over this.
Yeah, terrible. The clock. What was with the clock?
Right. Like I said, conspiracy against our founding fathers. So that's the issue, I think, is that NFL teams are too afraid to be patriotic in the modern environment and sign Ben DiNucci, America's quarterback.
I was honestly just going to say that teams were just afraid of that sidearm and the sidearm
after they saw what Mahomes did with it.
Yeah,
there's more evidence that they're too afraid of greatness.
So years ago, George St. Pierre, GSP, the MMA fighter, brought in, of all people, Joe Rogan to teach him how to do the spinning back kick. Because in his words, nobody threw a better spinning back kick in any form of professional fighting than Joe Rogan. And then he used it in a fight and he won, and he credited Joe Rogan with it. So it's not... he could have brought in... Mahomes could have brought in DiNucci.
Wild.
And just been like, this is...
Hey, teach me how to submarine it. Yeah.
Let me just... How did you do this? You had success somehow with this. It was amazing. I have to see this for myself. So it's possible. A champ brings in a champ. I get it. Well, okay. Now we lost the metaphor, but the point being is that this is something that could have happened. Ethan asks, for James drinking Mike Daniels Kool-Aid Corner.
Which I believe is a reference to Matt Daniels, the special teams coordinator. But this guy's about to go on a roll, so...
Yeah, we're not going to interrupt him. Given the hype over Greg Joseph's kicking prowess this year, what is the most Vikings way for the hype to implode? It can't be have a perfect season until the NFC Championship game, then miss the field goal, then that would clinch the Super Bowl berth, because been there, done that, nor in a playoff game played in sub-zero temperatures where 95-year-old Bud Grant appears in shirt sleeves to inspire the team to victory only to miss a game-winning chip shot field goal because, sigh. It seems like it would have to be for Greg Joseph to have a perfect season until the playoffs, including multiple 60-yarders. Line up for a game-winning extra point to tie the game, or rather in a tie game, only to have the snap fumbled by the placeholder so Joseph doesn't get some sort of a weird style pass, but lands awkwardly on his kicking leg, causing a non-contact tear of his meniscus, MCL, and ACL, thus ending his NFL career. The only remaining question is, which would hurt more? Antoine Winfield Jr. intercepting Joseph's quote-unquote pass and taking it to the house to win the game for Tampa Bay in the NFC Championship game, or Kyle Hamilton intercepting it for the Baltimore Ravens to win the Super Bowl?
So I think it has to be Antoine Winfield Jr. for a couple of reasons. One, I don't think many Vikings fans thought that Kyle Hamilton was going to be a serious consideration for the Vikings pick. He did, of course, fall to them before they traded out. And they did end up taking a safety, right? But, I don't think that one stings as much. It doesn't feel as much of a fumble. Whereas with Antoine Winfield Jr., the Vikings at the time very much needed a safety, right? Because they didn't have Cameron Bynum. Antoine Winfield was a second-round prospect that some had even mocked into the first round, so you could argue that he would have been a steal in the second round. And I don't know if you know this, he's related to Antoine Winfield Sr., his father, a longtime Minnesota Viking, who I personally I think should be in the Hall of Fame, but I don't like that. That case is just not ever going to be made. Rip. But he went to the University of Minnesota. He was a Golden Gopher. He was part of some really incredible Minnesota defenses, some of the best we've ever seen, and was a leader on that team too. So like very entrenched in Minnesota history. First, because of Antoine Winfield Sr. Second, because he went to the University of Minnesota. Third, because he did well there, and also filled a need that the Vikings had, and also has turned out to be a really good player. Kyle Hamilton hasn't done that yet. And so there's like multiple kinds of bitterness to be involved here if he's the one that takes to the house and wins the game. So I'm going to go with that one.
Kyle Slaby asks, has Russell Wilson always been this cringe, or has Denver's low oxygen density caused something to go wrong in him?
He's actually been more cringe in Seattle. Like, we haven't seen maximum cringe from Russell Wilson. He will unlock it, I guarantee you, but he's always been cringe. You ask any Seattle fan, of whom I know very few, because I'm not involved in that sort of shenanigan. But, there's like the TikTok where I think it was a TikTok. Maybe it was just a video that he posted to Twitter. Might have been before TikTok. Where he deemed himself, his alter ego, Mr. Unlimited. That was one of the most cringe things I've ever seen. He changes his like style and fit and personality every couple of weeks in a way that doesn't seem very natural, which is kind of the definition of cringe. I don't know. Like it's always
most
been
of
there.
the Sierra things.
Yeah. So that's always there. I'm going to link the Mr. Unlimited stuff in the show notes. Bad. I've only been able to watch that full video once. Every time I see it on the timeline and I click on it to watch it, I just stop even before he gets to saying Mr. Unlimited. It's just so bad.
Yeah. Also from Kyle Slaby, what is the unmistakable flavor of Norse code?
Charcoal and disappointment.
Yeah. To which we can go to Luke Braun asking, what have you done recently to put some, quote, unmistakable Latin flavor into your life? This was so bad today.
Oh my God. The NAFL. So if you're unaware, the NFL released a logo type. I don't know what it's actually called. A logo type where they just put an Enye or a tilde over the N. I don't actually know what it's called to make it an Enye. So it's an NAFL, even though it's like doesn't appear at the beginning. It doesn't matter. And also with it released an excellent. It's like sometimes if you've ever seen like internal graphic design documents for why you implement a logo, it's like they publish that for the public to consume. It's what it felt like to me. And that's dumb. That's bad. I hate it. But they explained like this is a way to bring an unmistakable Latin flavor into the NFL. It was extremely cringe. And then they actually posted like a menu, I guess, which had a dish called Papas Bravas, which I've never seen spelled that way. I've only heard of Papas Bravas with a V. But I don't speak Spanish, so correct me if I'm wrong, but I've never seen that. I Googled it and it auto-corrected it to Bravas. So there's that. And it started off with a story about colonization, which I think was like kind of their version of like a land acknowledgement, but like just became a weird way to celebrate conquistadors instead. Like it did the opposite. So I don't like.
Seemed odd.
Every element of it was bad, and then it just like got worse. Like at the end, they started celebrating colonialism. So like cool.
So the question is, have you done anything recently to put some unmistakable Latin flavor into your life, Arif?
Yeah, we brought Justice Mosqueda onto the podcast.
Yeah, I was going to say the birria I ate the other day, but yeah, that counts too.
Yeah.
DC or Delta BC Dad asks, how many police horses will be punched when the Vikings win? Should Kevin O'Connell take this into consideration when game planning? What sort of ethical dilemma does this present?
So there is a strong likelihood that Kevin O'Connell is is pro-police and therefore pro-police horse. One, he's an NFL coach. That just seems to be kind of the vibe you get, right? Like that doesn't seem controversial. Two, his father was an FBI agent and apparently one of a fairly great renown. So again, these are not certainties; these are likelihoods. But I feel like these are strong likelihoods, and so from his own personal set of ethics that I am imputing upon him, I would imagine that it is important to him to prevent the punching of police horses. So I would imagine that he would rather throw the game. So that's something to keep in mind. Personally, because the horses didn't get to choose to be police officers, I'm kind of, there as well. But I feel like you can avoid police horse punching. And I think a way to do that is to make the game as unexciting as possible. So, a 20-point blowout. Not a 38-7 blowout. I think that you circle back around, right? But, a 20-point, like a 20-0 blowout, it's boring. The game is never contested. Fans just kind of trail out of the stadium. Everything is kind of deflated. And so that I think is the best, because if it's like a last second field goal or 38-7 or, something along those lines where people are amped up leaving the game, those horses got to watch out, man. They got to literally take the blinders off. Head in a swivel.
Wow. That's literally
they
taking
got blinders on.
I know, literally taking the blinders off. That's what got me. That's what popped me here. So I just need to take a moment, reevaluate the podcast. All right, we're gonna keep going. Jeremy McGee asks, "You both grill/smoke meat a lot. Do you think the difference in meat yielded per money or per dollar is, as compared to taste, is worth it for something like short ribs or spare ribs? I love short rib, but I do find myself frustrated at paying for bones. I'll braise the short ribs, but spare ribs, and I love them. And if you trim them right and you do everything you're supposed to, I haven't done ribs yet this year. I need to do that before it gets too cold too. So thank you for reminding me, Jeremy, that this is something I need to do. But yeah, I can't. Smoking short ribs it doesn't work for me.
I think that everyone should try smoked short ribs at least once, but I understand where you're coming from. Braised short ribs are just incredible. The collagen gets into the braising liquid in a way that you just don't get with smoking, obviously. And that kind of construction is just phenomenal. So I think braising is better, but I think everyone should try smoked short ribs. The thing here is that when you're smoking meat, you're not like losing meat. You're primarily losing liquid. And a lot of that liquid is not necessarily flavor. And so, yeah, the end product of what you get is lighter in meat, and the proportion of weight that you're getting out of it is more bone than meat than when you started, right? Because the bones don't have very much liquid to lose in the process, but you're still getting the same amount of meat. It's just a little bit more concentrated because the meat has retracted a little bit. It's squeezed out a lot of that liquid. So you're not really losing much, but also I just think that viewing food entirely through this perspective that the amount of food that you get out needs to be efficient in terms of per dollar. That definitely has a place, especially if it's very difficult for you to keep food on the table because of economic circumstances. I'm not saying that that's bad, but if you've got a choice, that perspective really robs your enjoyment of a variety of food types. So I think that you should embrace the fact that with spare ribs especially, but with smoking meats generally, you're going to get a little bit less meat, but you're going to get a completely different experience. I mean, it's the same thing with aging steaks. I sometimes will prefer a completely fresh steak, especially because I'm going to get, quote unquote, more of it. And in the case of aging, you actually do get more of it because you have to cut off the aged parts of the steak on the outside. It's all aged, but the stuff on the outside.
Yeah, you cut off the pellicles because it's not edible.
Yeah. And so you are literally losing meat in that circumstance. But, that different flavor experience, I think, is just valuable to have. It's valuable to have as many experiences as possible, especially when it comes to something as like interesting and culturally relevant as food, because you learn a lot about people through the food that they eat. And so learning about other cultures through food is a ton of fun. And I would like to experience the different ways that happens. So I just I understand the frustration that you're shelling out a lot of money and it's per weight, and a lot of that money ends up in bones and whatever. Which, throw those bones in a stock pot and you'll get your money's worth out of them. But um, I think that you should just kind of say, hey, this is going to be a little bit more expensive. That's what I'm paying for. I'm not paying for spare ribs, right, which cost this much per pound. Rather, I'm paying for smoked spare ribs, which are a completely different meat, right? They're just a completely different cut of meat. And the way I'm going to think about them and treat them is going to be a little bit different. So I just think that if you have the economic latitude to not have to think about it in terms of calories per dollar, which I've definitely been there. I've been on food stamps. I've had to think about things in terms of calories per dollar. But if you're in a circumstance where you don't have to, embrace it. Embrace that some foods are going to cost a little bit more to be a different flavor experience. Sometimes it's not going to be as good as the flavors you're more familiar with. Sometimes it's going to be better, but you're not going to know until you do it. So I think that you should, if possible, shed the attitude about dollars per pound of meat, especially because technically you're getting a very similar amount of meat either way. It's just presented a little bit differently and it weighs less because there's a lot less liquid in it.
Don from Ohio finishes up with us today. Says, Dear Arif and Dusty, the wife and I are celebrating our wedding anniversary. I plan on making her a nice dinner. That's unfortunate. She loves seafood, especially.
Condolences to her.
Yeah, especially sea bass and grouper. How would you recommend preparing this? I would have asked James, but he would burn down our vehicles and our house.
I would generally, I should probably look up a recipe before recommending this, but I love smoked whole bass. You just, and I, again, look up a recipe. I'm just answering off the top of my head. But just cut some small slices into the fish, layer, a rub on the outside, obviously descale the fish and all that, but layer a rub on the outside, cut open the middle, and put something in the middle, maybe a little bit of lemon, some herbs, and smoke it really low for a while. And with your favorite, wood pellet flavor, right? That's
what he uses.
You have to do this.
Dusty's response was pan-seared with lemon, garlic, and some dill. I would just like to add that there is something just magical about when charcoal smoke hits seafood.
I agree. It's incredible. It's unique. It's a different way for charcoal smoke to interact with like chicken or beef, which is also delicious, but seafood is so unique when it interacts with charcoal smoke, and I guess Don will never know that.
Maybe someone should provide that for him. Maybe, if you're doing this for your wife, this is something for your wife. Your wife tends to prefer this. Just throwing that out there.
Right. Now, we do know that is
canon.
Fact.
That is Norse code canon.
Of all things. And hey, Don, what did I just say to Jeremy? Don't be afraid of flavor experiences just because you don't know how to do it.
Yeah. You do everything else terribly. Why can't you just add this to the top of the list? Like,
right.
That makes sense to me. That is going to be it for this episode of Norse Code. Arif, this is usually when I ask you, what do you have to plug?
Well, I am going to keep writing for The Athletic until September 21st. And so I will have two pieces. One of them has already been written and submitted that most of you will have access to by the time you listen to this. In fact, probably all of you, which is a piece on attacking the Eagles offense using the Vikings defense and how things will have to change from last week against the Packers. And then obviously I will be covering the Eagles game. I won't be there physically, unfortunately, but I'll be able to, summarize the Eagles game, and I'll have a piece afterwards, kind of discussing the Vikings approach there. So those two pieces at The Athletic, and then you can see my work afterwards at Pro Football Network.
Is there a paywall for Pro Football Network?
There's not. It is an ad-supported site, which new readers to The Athletic will not understand the distinction there because The Athletic has decided to introduce ads, tastefully inserted in a way that does not compromise The Athletic's journalistic vision, from my understanding. Which I could not find ads in the app. To me, it's just been on browsers. So if you want to avoid ads, I guess get the app. Maybe they'll find a way to resolve that in the next app update. But it's not paywalled. Anybody can read the articles over Pro Football Network. But it is an ad-supported site. So if you could turn ad block off when you visit the site, I would appreciate it because it pays my salary.
That is going to be it for this episode of Norse Code. Hope you guys have enjoyed it. We'll be back on Monday night, immediately after the game, so look out for that. For Reef, my name is James. Thank you guys so much for listening, and please remember that the Vikings are still not to be trusted. And we'll be back next week. Norse Code is the largest and only division of Norse Code LLC. You can find Norse Code on the Daily Norseman, SB Nation's Vikings blog, at dailynorseman.com. You can also find it on iTunes, Apple Podcast, Spotify, Stitcher, Google Play, and wherever fine podcasts are aggregated. Our Vikings blogger extraordinaire and generally useful human is Arif Hassan of The Athletic, and he can be found at Arif Hassan NFL. I am your producer and host, and my name is James Pagoshnik. You can find me at the show's official Twitter feed at NorseCodeDN or my personal account at Big Mono. If you'd like to donate a few bucks to the show, you can do so in a few different ways. You can go to patreon.com/NorseCode and donate there. For $3.50 a month, you get bonus material and more. You can also go to paypal.me/NorseCode for a one-time donation, or you can go to norsecode.threadless.com and pick up some Norse Code merchandise. Any questions or comments that cannot fit in a tweet can be sent to norsecodepodcast@gmail.com. On behalf of the Norse Code staff, thank you so much for listening.
Our formula is this.
All things are possible through the power of Ben DiNucci.